The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions of WBGR Network.
Mic's open, ready to go.
.703. Are we live?
Yeah.
I believe we're live. I pray that we are. Inshallah. Again, my name is Muhammad Bashir. I'm a retired attorney, 28 years of criminal civil trial experience, also specialize in constitutional law. I'm retired, so please don't call me and ask me to represent you. I got a lot of those calls last week, but I really do appreciate the thought. I'm here tonight on Freedom Fighters DMV. Your normal host is Sharif Shafi. Sharif is unavailable tonight. Again, he was kind enough to ask me to sit in, and I am more than gracious and more than humbled by the invitation. I have on my left, my right-hand man, James Tarek Lang, community activist, entrepreneur, business leader in the community, and just a downright good brother. I told you last week when I was hosting that I would open up the phone lines. I'm going to, because I wanted to hear what the community had to say, but in the interim, a couple of things happened that I think that we absolutely have to address because of the profundity of those particular things. So, the lines are open at area code 301-306-7284. Repeating it, 301-306-7284. And allow me, I'm also an author and a publisher. This is my book, Raw Law and Urban Guide to Criminal Justice. And this is also April 4th, Lessons on Living and Dying, which is a tribute to Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Adam Clayton Powell Jr., as well as some of the leaders who have helped steer me in the direction of leadership and in the direction of community service. I think you could gain something from both. My latest book is called America in Blackface. I just brought some excerpts here from it, and I want to start there because I think it encompasses what it is that we're going to talk about tonight. So allow me the benefit of being able to read you an excerpt, and you tell me how you feel about it. Now, you may recall that I discussed with you on a previous occasion what it is to be an American, and then I discussed with you the issue of your relevancy here in America and your position here in America. I'm hoping that you put these concepts together so that we can, as a community, begin to come together and have very viable and powerful discussions as to who we are and how we exist here in America. Because it's becoming almost crisis-like in the situation. So let me begin right here. This is chapter 5. It's called Equality, and it begins this way. And listen closely. What is it to be an American? This question is genuinely addressed to explain the phenomenon of in America in blackface. The most trusting community in the history of this country has always been the black community. The black community has always stood as a moral watchdog against American imperialism and capitalist expansion, primarily because of the slavery dynamic. Since the black man's infusion into America, the black masses have had a legitimate distrust of American institutions and morals. These institutions, allegedly based on American, quote, values, have historically been the architects of false promises or repression toward black people and others defined as minorities. Yet black people have, since emancipation, championed the American ideal and even stood with other groups like gays, unions, Native Americans, middle class and poor whites, and immigrants in their pursuit of the American dream. There has always been a home for all other communities and their struggles within the black community because of the recognition by black people that, quote, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. However, as each generation of black people become more Americanized, they become less and less morally outraged by systemic and institutionalized racism to the point that they too begin to co-sign and adopt the attitudes and practices that allow these racist institutions and practices to continue and, in some instances, to thrive. For example, how can anyone black accept a football team in Washington, D.C. being called the Redskins? Yet you cannot find two homes on any row of black homes in Washington on a fall Sunday not flying the colors of burgundy and gold while featuring that caricature of a red man or extolling the idea that it's just a name. This same community thereafter thinks that they can render a relevant or serious opinion on hip-hop artists or and their over-abuse of words like nigger or bitch while seeing no inherent contradiction. Black America, with all its moral and idealistic potential, is a damaged community, but racism, white supremacy, is the deranged philosophy and a mental illness that is producing this damage. Dr. Francis Quest Welsing, psychologist and author of the Crest Theory of Color Confrontation and the ISIS Papers, called this type of conduct in Black America the cycle of insanity. I'm going to skip something down here just to go to something that I think is a little bit more important. Unfortunately, this is the dynamic we see played out every day, and it is the same dynamic associated with the black community response to police shootings, black mass incarceration, black unemployment, etc. The community is unable to disassociate itself from the dominant culture's philosophy and accepts this disrespect, hoping that somewhere the ideal of equality or the brotherhood of all men will eventually impact this dominant culture. Wake up. It's not going to happen. Yes, it is disrespect being demonstrated when a young black man randomly kills another, or considers himself or others a nigger, or calls his woman or any woman a bitch. However, those who reprimand black youth are no less blameworthy on the disrespect scale when they call their team Redskins to the disrespect of Native Americans and their unique experience in devaluation here in America. They are just as bad in the disrespect department for their support for corporate hip-hop, reality TV, black profiteering off of stereotypical images as demonstrated by the salacious and moral inadequacy featured in the new wave of black entertainment programs like Empire. You all love that. Something Amiri Baraka in the 1960s called pimp art. All of these are equal in their adaptation, adoption of white education of black people, and thus culpable in black youth's response to this miseducation. Is a black boy who hustles narcotics in his own community hoping to come up by exploiting the misery of the community's condition, James St. Patrick of Power or Lucius Lyon of Empire Style, any different on the issue of disrespect for black life than a black actress whose character is lauded as a bitch, or a presidential mistress with no demonstrated remorse or respected value system that she can, as a thespian, rise above? It's clearly not her talent that's on display, it's her breast or her ass. The young black hustler is no different, in my mind, than a preacher or an activist, athlete or politician who flaunts an Escalade or a Benz or something more than a utility, while their neighbors, parishioners, supporters are starving. Hip-hop bling is just a gaudy expression of what others demonstrate in subtler, more penetrating ways, considering both come from a destructive premise of material success being more relevant than moral excellence. The young black thug is no different than the cop, the prosecutor, or the judge who observes illegal stop frisks, planted evidence, and fabricated evidence, testifying by cops and law enforcement and reports, and have control over the due process and do nothing to stop the process that's going on in the black community. Yet, black leadership remained mum at the fact that the Obama Justice Department refused to indict cops that gunned down unarmed black men and boys, while they indicted and convicted Baltimore youth for conduct during the rebellion, claiming that they were standing for justice, law, and order. Ironic, isn't it, that no one will go to prison for the death murder of Freddie Gray, but there are at least 4 Baltimore youth currently in prison for such life-threatening crimes as conspiracy to set fires. They must be black. The activist, politician, or preacher explains that their success is from hard work, while they deliberately overlook decades of their decisions to support a culture that deliberately disenfranchises, underemploys, and criminalizes black minds and bodies. Yet black leadership supported President Bill Clinton's assault on the black community, through welfare reform and the crack, powder, cocaine laws that everyone who backed him is now trying to retreat, escape from? Do you think that these assaults are lost on black self-esteem? Have you ever lectured to a group of young black men and have a 16-year-old tell you, as one told me, to a standing ovation from 20 others in the room, quote, and this is exactly what the kid said to me, "Don't tell me about abiding by the law when no one you know is abiding by the law. Not the cops, not the judge, not the politician, not even the effing president." That's an excerpt from America in Blackface. And that's what's prompting me to go off here tonight. And when I say go off, let me explain to you something. When we talk about leadership, there's leadership and then there's leadership. Adolf Hitler was a leader. Huh? Adolf Hitler was a leader. Genghis Khan was a leader. Napoleon Bonaparte was a leader. But these guys, the Pope who ordered the Inquisition and who ordered the transatlantic slave trade was a leader. But leadership does not equate to justice. What we need in our community and what's lacking from our community is leadership that equates with justice. And here's what I mean by that. If you back a system, and that system has within its tentacles injustice, and you continue to support it, and you continue to help that system thrive, you are as bad to the system as if you were the leader of the system. If you come from a religious tradition, if you're a Jew, Moses is your leader. If you're a Christian, Jesus Christ alayhi salam is your leader. Musa alayhi salam, your leader. If you are a Muslim, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is your leader. But the reason why their impact is so strong is because they come from a moral premise. They don't compromise their morality in order to get ahead. They don't have to sell out who it is that they say they represent in order to move the people forward. But we don't have that. And frankly, truth be told, let's go through the history, because we have literally never had that in the position of the leadership that's out there. And when we have had it, that particular leadership was assassinated or deliberately destroyed, and many times by the same people who want to be leaders under the paradigm of accepting what the system has to give them. If you go on my webpage on Facebook, you'll see a quote from Frederick Douglass. And it basically says that find out what the people, what level of subjugation that people will accept, and you'll find exactly the level of oppression that they'll get. Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And that's exactly what we have. So when somebody says to you, go back to the country you come from, we have to come to an understanding that that's been a mantra of racist white America since colonial days. Thomas Jefferson had that same mantra. He didn't come out publicly and say it, but he was the one who began to try to seek out ways to get blacks out of the country and shipped off to West Indies, the Caribbean, etc. Now, it was directly in connection to those who were black who were leading revolutions, because the Haitian Revolution comes along as he becomes part of the leadership, 1791 to 1805. That's Thomas Jefferson's era. So he's smart. He's like, I don't want this kind of a revolution on my hand. Now, again, when you read their history book, because they're writing the living history, they'll want to tell you that it's directly related to some level of benevolence or some level of freedom. But think about this. Your national anthem was written in 1812 by virtue of the War of 1812. And that at that time, the British were fighting the U.S., and the British offered slaves freedom if they joined the British. And so the slaves joined the British, 6,000. And this is why Francis Scott Key writes that particular stanza in there about the slaves. This is why it's an antagonistic song toward black people and toward slavery. That the people who literally are fighting for their freedom, because it's being offered to them by the British, are the ones who are antagonistic to the United States and what it stands for. But Francis Scott Key is one of those people who were on those boards of the American Colonization Society who founded Liberia. Let's get these niggas out of here. They don't want to be here, get them out of here. They want to criticize, get them out of here. So the original slave who comes here as a revolutionary. He's fighting. This is why he has to be whipped. This is why he has to be tortured. From 1510 to 1865, there are over 250 slave rebellions. Now think about that. 1518 to 18, that's less than 300 years. And there's over 250 slave rebellions. These are people willing to fight back, wanting to fight back, wanting to fight for their freedom. By the time we get to the point of Liberia's 1822, they're trying to get that rebelliousness out of the country. But who do they send? They send freed slaves, that is mulattoes, the ones who were their own descendants and their own children, to Liberia. And what do you think they do? Because they get to Liberia and they become entangled with the people of Liberia, who are colonized people as well. Because you just don't walk up there and just plop a whole bunch of black people into an African country and then say, here. But they did exactly what the leadership here does now. They got over there and decided, wait a minute, we're better than the people here. We are going to run this. All right? And so therefore, that's what created the antagonism. The Americans, what they call Americo-Africans or something like that, come in to the African continent and decide that the way they do things, we're going to have a democracy, we're going to have elected government, we're going to have all the things that they thought they could have over here, they now want to implant and impose on Africans in Liberia and over there. And this is why they have the antagonism over there. Even to the point to where, can you believe that the capital of Liberia, from the United States all the way over to Africa, these Africans, these African Americans, these black people who were transposed over there as free to establish a colony that would be beholden to the United States, get over there and they name the capital Monrovia after James Monroe. They couldn't come up with a nice African name to name the continent. You see what I'm saying? So then and again, the history doesn't stop with the mindset of what the leadership is, because the leadership is locked into the only system that it knows to win on, which is where we are today. We are still locked into a system that says that this system can work for us, when it has proven over and over and over that it will not. It never was intended to work for us. So you have Republicans right now who are black. I don't know why anybody would be a black Republican. I just don't understand the concept. Black Republican, that's like you join the club, because I don't understand why anybody would be a Crip or a Blood, truth be told. Because it has no basis in morality or in history that would suggest that it benefits you. So, you got black Republicans, you got black Democrats. I don't understand why anyone would be a Democrat. I mean, I understand you registering as a Democrat, but if you shouting out Democratic policies, there are no Democratic policies that you can point to over the last 100 years that were designed to benefit you as a community. So why would you buy into that system? And the minute you buy into that system, it's like calling your team the Redskins. You are insulting everything that your history has put forward, that your history is demonstrating to you. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I was listening, and it's pretty good, very informative. One of the things that when you talked about Liberia, I mean, and as you stated, that this was a territory that the United States had involvement with and control. So the part of the situation is that America placed leadership. They sent African Americans or Africans back to their place, but they placed those leaders in charge. Mm-hmm. And their leaders that they placed in charge, they didn't give them free will. They basically placed them in charge with, this is what we want you to do. Mm-hmm. And this is what happens most of the time throughout time in our community, whether it's in Africa, whether it's here. We have individuals that are placed in charge, and they have a goal that's given to them by the people that have put them in place. And so, like, with the Liberian situation, it's a natural thing that they had the conflict, between the people. I mean, and that continues. We're always getting somebody that they place and put in charge, whether they place them directly, by appointing them, or they place them indirectly by, supporting them and from behind. And we think that this is a natural process. Oh wow, this is our new leader, and he doesn't like the system. But the reality is, he is sent from the system.
He is sent from the system, and therein lies our dilemma. And that's why, if we are telling our children, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, and not knowing the history of what it is to be a Republican or is it to be a Democrat, then we are pulling them into a system, a plantation system, that always leaves them as the trickle-down people.
So
the
then
people who
how do
benefit
we-
only at the bottom.
I mean, the thing is, you know, with titles, especially like you said, when it comes to, you know, voting. So how do we deal with that? If you say, okay, don't call yourself Republican, don't call yourself a Democrat, you might as well not call yourself independent because there's another name. So what do? Do you not call yourself anything, just vote? Do you don't get into primaries, you only wait for the general election? What's the plan?
Okay, well, that's good. We're going to get to that. So let's continue with the history, because it will help us point out what it is that we do. So now, you got 1822 with Monrovia. You also have 1822 with Denmark Vesey. You also have 1835 with Nat Turner. So you got rebellion in the world. You got rebellion still existing. So Abraham Lincoln is the one who is now proposing that blacks be sent out of the country, maybe to Haiti, maybe to Santo Domingo or somewhere, but we got to get them out of the country before they actually destroy the country, destroy the fabric of the country, because they're willing now that there's still some around who haven't been beaten down, who haven't been indoctrinated properly, who still want to fight back. The vast majority, though, don't want to fight back, and therein lies the issue. Are you American, and therefore you adopting this particular way of doing things because the way of doing things is an antithesis of the way you need to live? Or are you going to find solutions that are separate and apart? The only solution that was separate and apart was, so far that was successful, was Haiti. And then with the Bolivarian Revolution, which came about some 25, 50 years later in Central America, now you have at least some pushback, where people are gathering and becoming independent in their thought and saying, we need to be independent of what they do. We are going to be totally independent of what they do. And so Abraham Lincoln comes along, he has the same idea, get him out of the country. All right? But by that time now, the vast majority of the leadership in the black community has become locked into the system. So then therefore, because black people fought in every war with the same mentality, if we show them that we're human, they'll treat us like we're human. It never worked, because their concept about you is defined as less than human, but even more so than that is that if you become human, you begin to replace them in their minds. Francis Welsing said this, not me. You begin to replace them or have the potential of replacing them, and therefore, in their minds, taking away the power that they have.
Of course. Okay, so in this time, because you're going to 1820s, 1830s, and you're saying leadership, black leadership.
Right.
You know, black leadership throughout time changes. So at that time, who are you considering the black leadership? And you're saying the black leadership had a certain opinion. Well, who was the black leadership?
Well,
What was the black leadership? Are we recognizing the black leadership to only be the individuals that they appointed, or are we recognizing the black leadership to be the people like Nat Turner and other people that actually revolted, and we don't hear their names, and they were leaders, and they were leading these revolts throughout the place, and they were considered the black leaders. They were people that fought. They were people that we don't hear about, that were of the 100 people lynched at one time, and 50 people lynched, and so these are black leaders, but you know, and I mean, what leaders are you talking about?
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about both levels. I'm talking about solutions that black people came up with to benefit themselves, as opposed to solutions that other people came forward with that they put out in front of black people for the purpose of saying, this will help you get to the next level. The one that won out in America was the one that the culture and the system put up in order to make black people feel appeased. So, for example, after the Civil War, with the Civil War, you have a Civil War going on. What does Lincoln do in the middle of the Civil War? It's the same Lincoln that wants black people out of the country. What does he do? He knows the North is losing the war, and he's losing the war because the South is at slave labor. So the kids that are fighting in the North don't have slave labor. They still have to provide for their families. They still have to X, Y, Z. So they like conflicted. Am I going back and forth between home, or am I going out here to stay in this war? But in the South, they can go away because they got slaves doing all their work and making their money and still supporting their system. So Lincoln says, I'm going to emancipate Everyone who's in a slave state or a slave state that's at war with the United States, all of you are free. As a way of bringing black people into the system and saying to them, now, you can fight for your freedom as long as you're part of a slave state. And black people jumped on it. I mean, naturally, you would think that that would be something to jump on. But what did it do? It took away the prospect of revolution, the prospect of independent thought, independent solutions, and they joined into the system. And when they joined into the system, remember, the Emancipation Proclamation only freed slaves that were in the states at war with the Union. Didn't free all the slaves. So it told you that it was a political move that dragged slave labor out of the South and therefore broke the back of the South to be able to continue to fund its own revolution against the so-called Union. That's what it did, and that's what it was designed to do. But what it did was it offered a unreasonable sense of hope in the black community that if they, again, same thing they had in Revolutionary War, 1812, all the other wars leading up to the Civil War, that if we show them that we are good participants and good citizens, they'll respect us and they'll give us our rights.
But okay, going back to that time period when in 1863 or whatever, you say after Emancipation Proclamation, and then them allowing the slaves to be able to come over and fight with the Union Army to fight against the Confederates.
Right.
And of course, as you stated, that was the change in the tide. Mm-hmm. But during that time, I don't see the people as being laid back, complacent, trying to get into the system. I mean, I see it at that time. You had people that said, okay, I can gain my freedom. Mm-hmm. I can go, give me that gun, and let me go fight against the one that is enslaved. And because that has enslaved me for all this time. Mm-hmm. And because of that, it turned the whole tide, and then they won. And then after, when we actually, because of most of the states were predominantly black, when we got a chance to right to vote, we had all the skills, we had all the I mean, during the Black Reconstruction period and stuff, mm-hmm. blacks really rose. Mm-hmm. That's when you had the rise of racism, the Ku Klux Klan, and all these other things because of the progress we were making. It wasn't people just saying, I wanted to be included. And at that time, we were Republicans. I'm not praising the Republican, ideology, but I'm saying, we put these things by saying you take on a name, but it's like, or the same thing, take on a title of being American, but it's the mindset.
That's right.
That I say that if you take on that and you say, okay, I'm going to take on this Republican, I'm going to act like them. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take on this American and act like them. But if we look at these people at that time and the things that they were able to do after they got their freedom from forced labor and they got a chance to fight and kill a lot of the oppressors, mm-hmm. And to do war the way that they were doing,
right.
And killing your oppressor I can't say there was some weak people, bro. There was some very solid, strong, had heart,
Look, I agree with all of that. But what I'm suggesting to you is that the lack of understanding of what is systemic versus what is emotional is what we have never really wrapped our head around. Frederick Douglass gives a speech on the 4th of July. Mm-hmm. And he asked the people in New York, I think it was, he's not talking about a slave state now. Are you mocking me by asking me to be here? I'm talking to a nation whose crimes are like the crimes of savages. This is who he's talking to. He's talking about the collective. He's not talking about just simply as the South that has got people enslaved. He's talking about the fact that the South might have you enslaved, but the North is benefited from insurance companies and banks and college institutions that slaves are building. He understands the full gambit of that, but the masses of black people are brought into the system by virtue of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. So they want to fight. They figure if they get their liberty, then they'll get that emancipation. Now, Reconstruction comes about right after after the Civil War. They win on the Union side. And what happens? The same thing that happened in 1692, the Bacon Rebellion. Poor white slaves get together and burn down Jamestown. Right on the heels of them burning down Jamestown with the intent of, we're going to liberate this country, we're going to all be free-thinking people, we're all going to work and earn our own way. The system, authored by elite whites, tells poor whites, if they get their freedom, you lose out. So we'll make you slave patrols. We'll make you this. We'll make you overseers. And poor whites take the system and flip it on top of the blacks. And the blacks go back into slavery, and the poor whites become your poor whites that you see today. Those who are cops and all that kind of stuff, who think they have to oversee the black community. Well, that's the same thing that happens with Reconstruction. With Reconstruction, you get your Dred Scott decision, 1857, I think it's 1857, where it says that a black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. That particular black man sued the government. So that tells you that the people were interested in their freedom, tells you that they were thinking outside the box. But he sued in that system. Instead of just staying his behind in Illinois or wherever it was where it was a free state, he decides he's going to sue because he believes that the system is supposed to work for him, and the system tells him exactly how it feels. A black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. And so therefore, this Reconstruction, the radical Republicans get together and they say, we got to do something for these people. That's where they come up with your 40 acres and your mule. That's when they come up with your Freedmen's Bank. The 40 acres and a mule lasts 27 minutes. The Freedmen's Bank lasts 1 year, long enough for black people to take whatever money they earn and invest it in the bank, and then the system, that is the people who are in charge, white philanthropy, take the money and run with it, leaving all these black people destitute. So while they're building these institutions, while they're trying to build masonry and blacksmiths, and they have all the skills, they are building that with inside of the fact that they had already built most of America. So they're trying to put those skills to use. But they aren't recognizing, and the leadership isn't recognizing, that the nature of what's going on here is that the people who are in charge of this particular apparatus called the United States of America and the Constitution do not believe that you have a right that they have to respect. So even with your 13th Amendment, which was designed for black people, even with your 14th Amendment, which was designed for black people, the next thing was the Civil Rights Act that came out. The Supreme Court knocked it down, said it was unconstitutional, and they went right back to slave codes and black codes, and the same people who were the ones who authored your 13th and your 14th Amendment that were designed for black people are the same ones who come out, radical Republicans, the same ones who come out and say that we're going to give the land back to the South. I know it was Andrew Jackson. He was a racist. I think it was Andrew Johnson. He was an absolute racist. But the point was, the same people in the North and the South got together and came together because the system was more important. See, Lincoln doesn't free the slaves because he wants them free. He wants to maintain the Union. He has to win this to maintain the Union. A political motive, not a moral motive. Our leadership has got to have a moral motive in it. Okay. And if we don't have it, then we fall victim to the system each and every time.
Okay, so sticking back with leadership, going back to it, because you keep saying the leadership. You know, there's system-appointed leadership, and then there's the natural community leadership that we've had. And I mean, I'm always taking the position in these places, we've always had strong black leaders. But they're not in the books. They're not talked about. You know, most people don't know. And so throughout time, we've always had that. And that's, so we have to make that distinction when we're talking about leadership. You know, there's people that bought into the system that say that I'm going to be a part of it. There's people that use the system but never bought into the system, and they try to use it to be able to benefit it because it was affecting them. And then there's people that just never even got involved in the system. But there's always different types of leaders, and I believe that we've had strong black leaders throughout time. It's just that most people don't put them in history. I mean, even case in point, you would ask the average black about Paul Robeson, and people will have their opinion and all that. But the reality is when you have a man that his father was a slave, or in that forced labor, owned by somebody. This guy graduated from from Rutgers University, and All-American football player. Graduated from Columbia University, and actually I found out when he came to Columbia, they had a parade for him in Harlem. And then this man, while he graduated from Columbia, couldn't get work. As far as for what his level was, and got into acting and doing other things, and spoke 23 different languages, You know, all of these things. This is black leadership.
Yep.
And it wasn't okay. People are like, well, what movement did he lead? The reality is that for us, imagery is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And when they started the in Hollywood, right? When the first Birth of a Nation, this movie that they started, and they during that time of Reconstruction, they showed us the imagery that they pushed out. And it was a silent movie before a movie even had sound. They pushed out this savage image, this image of this man that wanted to get a white woman and doesn't know how to govern himself. And so they've always pushed that. While Paul Robeson at that same time will refuse to get into those type of movies because he knew that this projected imagery that they was illuminating around the rest of the world to the people would be something that would work against him, because even when he died and the individuals that were played in these movies died, they would continue to push this type of imagery.
Absolutely.
And so they don't want us to know that there was a black man that was, that can be able to speak 23 different languages, that can be an all-American athlete, that can be able to stand up and not play sample movies.
Absolutely.
So that's leadership, but it's leadership in a different way. Then we also have the political ones, we have the business ones, we have the religious ones. We have so many different types of leaders that most of the people don't talk about.
Absolutely, but that's exactly what my point is. My point is that the people who drag you into the system when you start calling yourself Republican and Democrat and you start calling yourself American are the people who are dragging you into the system. They don't represent the vast masses of black people, and they never have. All right, what they represent is an interest that says I can get closer to being white, and it means many times that you have to look down on your own people in order to do that. You don't have
buy
that.
into it.
You don't have. That's right. You don't have that
If
from
you
Henry
buy into
Highland
it.
Garnett, 1870s. All right, he's one of the first Pan-Africanists. You don't have that from him. You don't have that from Nat Turner. He's saying revolution. We have to free ourselves from the yoke of these people. You don't have that even from Frederick Douglass.
And I honor Nat Turner for what he did, but that was an act that he did.
Right.
There's movements that were done
Absolutely.
by other people.
Absolutely.
Yes, okay, it's great. But in order for us to be able to have a change that's going to be affected for all of us, it actually has to come from different avenues, not just an act. Okay, I'm going to go up and I'm going to kill these white people. I'm going to show that we're going to stand up. We're not going to just lay down and be slaves. Right. But there's going to be other people that's going to have to gain skills. People are going to have to work. People are going to have to teach. People actually may have to get involved in the politics, but not let that.
That's the issue.
Lead them. It's just like we always say, you can have a lot of money, but don't let the money run you.
That's right. But that's exactly what the argument is. That's exactly what I say in Blackface. And when I read the little excerpt, the preacher nowadays is not much different in image than the drug dealer.
Now, I beg to differ on that.
Well, I'll give you an example. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. You say that a drug dealer, he's selling something that's illegal, and it's to the detriment of the community. Now,
more than just a detriment to the
well,
death.
let's talk about whether it's a detriment.
To the death.
Whether if I give you a drug and that drug is illegal and it harms you, or if I give you a philosophy and that philosophy harms you, which means, you can transfer the drug from me to you, but you transfer philosophies through decades. Okay. The concept of black superiority, we had a thing called the talented test in that Reconstruction we were talking about, right? That's Du Bois. That's T. Thomas Fortune. That's those intellectuals. You have your Booker T. Washington. But who are the architects wait a minute, who are the architects of eugenics?
Right,
who are the ones who supported eugenics?
I'm going back to this drug thing because
nothing
destroyed the cultural movement that we had in New York City. And of all the people coming from all over the world and all the different cultures and all the great leaders and all the, like you said, Adam Clayton Powell and Malcolm X and all of these people, and putting that and building a culture of thinkers, of mindset, of development. And those people that joined the enemy and sold the heroin to our people.
Who did that? Who did that?
Wait. I'll let you talk. I'm not one of them people that will say, oh yeah, but you know what? They had the planes and they brought it in. Brother, one thing is this. I don't have to sell it to my people.
Agreed.
And if I sell it to my people and sell them drugs and destroy my people, I say, oh well, I couldn't get a job.
How different is that than
importing?
That's exactly my point. You're making my point. How different is that than a philosophy that you accept that destroys your people? How different is that?
Two. One is you're talking about let's look at it. We'll just look at the example. Let's look at Harlem. So let's look at the effect of,
now,
in that short,
in 1918 to 1930, Harlem was the home of eugenics, and it was black leadership that was backing eugenics, and that is that there were inferior.
And even with that, we still had the Malcolm. We still had the Adam Clayton Powell. We still had the growth. Now let's go. Now let's go 1968. 1968, after the riots.
Don't go after the riots.
Okay.
Go before the riots.
But no, I'm talking about
the riots create
Malcolm. I'm talking about Black
uh,
Revolution.
Okay,
Because
good.
Black Revolution, what happens is, like, with Black Revolution signing up to be the #1 killers of the black community, bro. The reality is this. You know, here it is. When, like, if you read my father's book, Who Took the Weight? Well, during my father's generation, the drug dealer was the enemy.
That's right.
The pimp was the enemy.
That's
In
right.
the book, they talk about cutting off the heads of the drug dealers.
Absolutely.
And cutting them, you find the heads and bodies of the pimps in the park, and then we go from that.
What difference is
we
he-
go from that to
what
them being the heroes.
What difference is he from Nat Turner?
Who? What? Where?
What difference is your father's philosophy from Nat Turner's or Denmark Vesey's? When they say, if you want to participate with them in that system,
I'm going
we have
back.
to kill you
No.
first.
Mine is going back to the heroin, bro.
Okay, I'm saying
Going back to it because the two phases.
Because
Because all I can know is my community. New York City,
Okay.
Bronx, Manhattan.
Let's
Brooklyn.
talk New York City.
So
I know
going
New York
back,
City as
going
well.
back to the heroin and the effect of what the drugs did and the people, like you say, yes, it's a bad thing when a black joins in and says, "I'm going to be a part of the Republican Party and sell the people this philosophy. I'm going to be part of the Democratic Party and sell the people this. I'm going to be part of the Ku Klux Klan, whatever, and sell the
Absolutely.
people." But when somebody says that I'm going to be part of the demons and go out and sell heroin to the people, seeing what it's doing to the babies, seeing what it's doing to the children, seeing how it's destroying the community, right? And then after, when the crack comes up, and seeing what it's doing, and seeing how you talk about social, you talk about spiritual, how much it destroyed people, how much when the people had the heroin, the people that was righteous people became unrighteous because of the drug that they had. Not, I'm going to change my mindset because of a thought.
Right.
No, I changed it because I can't help myself.
Okay,
And going back to it, so many people that, even family members that I know, geniuses, brothers, that was destroyed, even though they wanted to help themselves. The other thing, from your philosophy or somebody else's philosophy, I can help myself because I'm not going to listen to that nonsense. I can say I'm going to be a Republican and then still be able to do what I'm going to do. But once I get addicted to heroin, or once I get addicted to crack, come on, brother.
Bruh, look.
Breaking out of that, I had to look. I'm looking at myself and my family.
Look, you ain't.
I got a line of people that is
preaching to
addicted
the
to it,
choir.
and I had to really work to be able to try to not fall into it, look at the things in myself. But as far as, you know, okay, whether I'm gonna be a cookie or whether I'm gonna be a Republican and I'm gonna follow the people, that's a little easier for me to defeat. But defeating my desire.
Show me how it was easy to defeat. I'll tell you about drugs in the 60s. All right?
Okay,
In the
okay.
drugs in the 60s, that wasn't offered into the black community by the black community.
It doesn't matter.
Listen closely.
Okay.
All right? That was offered into the black community by the government. That was Richard
I
Nixon
agree.
declaring war on drugs and
I agree.
allowing drugs to come in. And black people went with it. Your Frank Lucases, etc. Look at your American Gangster. That's Richard Nixon saying, we have an enemy. We know a way to destroy the enemy. We know how to get Martin Luther King and these people and get them off the street. We'll give them drugs, right? So they gave them drugs. But where did the drugs come from? They came from a system, the same system that we are bringing our kids in each and every day. Wait a minute. This is one of your pet arguments too, because I'm getting ready to get to it.
Okay.
Here's what it is. Now, so after Nixon, you get Ronald Reagan. Now you got crack cocaine is coming into our system. You can get rich quick. And the whole philosophy that our politicians, because now you got black politicians from 65 to 69, the same people that King was saying, we need to have a radical revolution of values, who are now saying, no, we don't want to do that, Dr. King. We're okay with the system the way it is. The same thing they said with the Civil War, we're okay with the system the way it is until it flipped on them. And it flipped on them with crack cocaine. Crack cocaine is just another example of lynching, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you got Black Wall Street burned down to the ground. You got Red Summers, black people being lynched in all over the place by whites. The only difference now is that black people are now participating in the system the way every other culture has participated in the system against black people, and it's by virtue of the leadership that says we're better than them niggas. We're not like them, and so
Right.
therefore, if you don't create anything in your community, if you eliminate the heads, You eliminate the Malcolms, you eliminate the militants, you eliminate the H. Rap Browns. May Allah bless him. He's still fighting for his life over there in prison.
May Allah make him free.
I mean,
May Allah make him free.
you eliminate them, and then you offer your bourgeois black class, what can we do? We need more cops on the street. Well, wait a minute. Wasn't our argument in 61 that the cops are beating black people down? Yeah. So how are we now in 75, 76, when drugs are coming in, arguing about black people getting beat down?
Because this thing is let's go back to the people. One of the people is my brother Malik Shabazz.
Absolutely.
May Allah forgive him for his sins.
I mean,
Allah. Right? And this is where we have is the book. Actually, I'll just take a pause. The shirt that I have, last time I had Jamaatul Sijji, and people had asked about it, and that's we do prison dawah, but the Prophet ﷺ said, "Dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul lil kafir." The life of this world is a prison to the believer, and it's a paradise to the disbeliever. So it's a reminder that we're just doing time. Adam was sent down here for a certain amount of time. He said, "Ihmitu minha jami'an," get down, all of you. And we're supposed to be here hatahim just for a certain amount of time. So going back to this is ihsan, right? Perfect worship. And the Prophet ﷺ had said, when Jibril asked him, he said, "Inform me what is ihsan." After he had asked him about Islam, Iman, and the highest level, he said ihsan. He said is to worship your Creator, worship Allah, worship the Creator, as though you see Him, but know that you do not see Him. You cannot see Him, basically. But He sees you. And this is the issue. This is the issue with leadership. This is the issue that the people don't understand, that they don't practice the best type of worship.
That's right.
And when you do an action with the consciousness that and do it as though, right, as though that you see in your Lord, as though that you see Him, but you know that He doesn't see you, but understand that He sees you.
Right.
And so many times people have sold out,
right,
as though the Creator did not see them.
That's right.
As though the Creator is not who He is. And so one of the things about Malik Shabazz is that sincerity, that example, again, an example of a person that was sincere, but he went to the next level, and he was going to have a guidance. And when you have this type of book of a guidance, you can put your name on and whatever, and you follow it and stuff. You will not be misguided, because like you said, man, yahdillahi fahuwa muhtadi. Whoever he guides, he is guided. وَمَنْ يَضْلِلْ فَلَنْ تَجِدَ وَلِيًّا مُرْشِدًا. And whoever He allows to go astray, you will never find anyone.
That's right.
So one of the things is everybody has philosophies. Everybody has understandings.
Right.
And the thing is we don't have beliefs. But we have beliefs. But in order to believe something, you have to put that forth as your solution.
Agreed. Now, so
that's the solution.
And if we agree with that, then we have to come to an agreement that which has been leading us is either cowards or traitors. Malcolm, if you vote for a party and that party has made promises to you and they're unable to keep that promise after you spent your time electing them, you're either a fool or you're a traitor to your race. Something that's paraphrasing, right? And therein lies what the dilemma is. This is why I took the history, because again, each time we get close to where our concept is we can only defeat the system or only participate in the system on a moral level.
But going back to what our Creator said, he said, do not say hurtful speech. So if I'm one of those people that have decided to take that name, and that statement that you just made,
right,
it hurts my feelings, so I may like you. But what you just said hurts me. And that's why the wisdom in what our Creator said, He said, don't say these things, He said, because it may cause somebody to say something. So I'm a Democrat. I say I'm a Republican. Right. And now you just said I'm this, that, I'm that.
No, I'm saying I'm saying that Malcolm said this.
What did he say?
That if you put all of your votes behind the Democratic Party, I think he was talking about it then, but he meant generically about any public or political party.
Of course.
But they cannot keep the promise to you,
of course,
that they said that they would keep.
Of course.
And you continue to support them, you're a traitor to your race. That's what he said. That's not what I said.
When he was Malcolm or Malik?
The point is that
because when he was Malcolm, he had the guidance of the person that he said that was their prophet.
Understand.
When he was Malik, he had the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hujurat, He says, do not call people by nicknames.
That's
right?
nicknames. That's right.
Exactly. So
That's right.
if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a guidance, then no matter what our culture, what our tribe, what our people, what everybody else says, we have to reject that and follow what he says.
Okay.
If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent revelation from the heavens down and he said, do not call people by these nicknames, offensive nicknames, you know, when we say they're this, they're that, then we can't do that.
But that's
No
not
matter
the
how
point.
good it sounds.
That's not the point. It's not a matter of it sounding good. What it is putting the categories together so that we understand what the system is doing to us and how we keep falling back into.
We can do that without the names.
We can. But again, so
it's not the best thing.
So if I say someone is a drug dealer and they're a drug dealer, that's not calling them out of their name. That's just telling who they are. All right.
So
drugs. Now, if they're selling,
if they're selling drugs and you can convict them, you got enough evidence that you know.
And absolutely. And the point
you can indict them.
the point being that what we haven't come to an understanding of is that we are constantly going in cycles into a system that is doing its best to lock us out and doing its best to destroy that which we want to put forward, which is a moral concept, a concept that there's a creator, he got power over all things, and he asks us, he tells us that we're the best community created for mankind because we encourage what is right, forbid what is wrong, and we believe in Allah. So
exactly.
Therefore, that's our mandate. So we have to, I think I got a better shot at that kid from the block who's hustling because he needs some money than I do with the guy whose philosophy is embedded in that I got the money and I want to keep it.
And I agree on that part.
And so
like
therefore,
I said,
that philosophy penetrates that kid. That kid is following a philosophy. That philosophy of let me get mine, just like they got theirs.
But volunteering in the prison, right? This is what we were talking about today, and we were talking about trying to have a zero murder. You know, we got to have it where, okay, everybody, let's put up the white flag. You know, that's like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, with the actually Hajj times come up, Arafat, and he had that beautiful speech.
Right.
And then he said, you know, the retribution. And he said, you know, I absolve anybody for what happened. And we have to have that day amongst our people. A brother just got out of jail. He got murdered the same day.
Right.
And what happens is, if you murder my family, then all I'm doing is waiting for the time, and I'm gonna get you. And
that's
then
right.
you now, because I got you, now you're gonna get me. And it's a cycle.
Where's
so
the
we
philosophy?
have to.
What's the philosophy of that?
We have to have a zero. We have to work to try to establish there has to be a peace day. There has to be a goal. So 10 years from now, we can meet that point where we're going to be able to sit down and say, you know what, this is the start of our peace day. No more, whatever happened in the past, no one's going to kill him. But we have to first start now talking about it.
That's right.
Working towards that goal. And in order to reach that goal, then we first start to have to work on stop killing each other.
But the impediment to that is that there is philosophy out there that we accept as being relevant that allows us to have that kind of
And that's why
retribution.
you got to teach what Allah says.
This is what I'm saying.
Surely he's your clear enemy. He told us about it.
It's about systems that
Get
are
this
teaching.
straight.
They are teaching us things that are against our fitra.
And
that
we're
are
doing a
against our
system
soul.
that's teaching to change
And
that.
that's what we have.
Well, what you're doing right now.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You're making my argument because I say that in order for us to move forward as a community, we have to eliminate these labels.
Right.
And begin to deal with what's right because it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
We can't be talking about, oh, I'm a Republican and therefore I support Donald
Understood.
Trump and Donald Trump is
Understand.
evil. We can't support Elijah Cummings and Elijah Cummings is evil.
Understand.
And I'm not saying either one of them is evil. I'm just saying if they are evil and we're able to demonstrate it through history, through their record, through whatever, then we can't support that.
Right.
All right? If they're stealing the money, we
So you're
can't
saying
support
eliminate
that.
these titles.
We gotta eliminate that. We gotta
I
stop
agree.
buying.
100%.
We gotta stop
Eliminate
buying
the titles.
into this foolishness.
Eliminate the titles.
This is not who we
Eliminate
are.
the titles.
We are the people that are going to either change this because we're the only ones who really have an incentive to change it.
Right.
If you're middle class white, you don't have an incentive to change the condition of Black America, so-called Black
you don't.
America. If you are middle class Black,
Anything.
you don't have the incentive to change, except that you're embarrassed by what goes on the street corner each and every day.
Yeah.
But there has to come a time, let there arise from amongst you a nation that will encourage what is right and forbid what is wrong.
Right.
That's who we have to become. We have to begin to get people to understand that the connection between Musa is, and that the Jewish community follow, is that he stood for right. He wasn't afraid that the Pharaoh was going to wipe out his people, but he stood on what it was that he stood on. You're not going to be able to turn me from this vision.
And real quick, between those three, and look at this, and this, like you said, Moses stood up to the superpower at that time.
Stood up to the superpower, absolutely.
You know, alayhi salam, Moses alayhi. Isa, Jesus, stood up to the superpowers, to the people, and those were the hypocrites and other people,
Absolutely.
and indirectly dealing with, because the Romans were running them. As
That's
they always
right.
wash their hands. No, you can't wash your hands. Those are your people.
That's right.
You know, so he stood up to that system. He stood up and he pointed out. We had to point out the hypocrites.
That's right.
The traitors.
That's
like I saw the infiltrators amongst the people.
Absolutely.
And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood up against the system of what? False worship.
There you go.
And that's what they do. And Ibrahim,
And
the father of all of them.
That's right.
What did he do? He stood up
That's
against
right.
it.
That's right.
And they stood up the system, but they had a moral code. They
That's
had
right.
a code.
That's right.
And this is what we have to do.
And
we have to
that
follow the
moral code
guidance.
does what? That moral code is just what Allah says. That the sun engulfs, that the light engulfs the darkness.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It envelopes
Allah-
the darkness.
Allah-
And that's what we have to do. We have to
يخرج من
bring the
الظلمات
light.
إلى النور.
That's right. We have to
So
bring
he
the light to
brings
the
you from
community.
darkness
And if
to
we
light,
don't,
or
and the
الذين
reason why
كفروا
we're not able to bring the light, or at least we're having a problem bringing
Bringing the light.
We're
We're bringing the light.
We're
We're bringing the light. We're bringing the light, everybody. That's what we're trying to do. Bring the light.
The reason
We're
why
gonna
we
bring
don't
the
bring
light,
the
man. Our
light is
reward.
because those people
You're
out
bringing it.
there
You're
are
bringing it.
buying into
Bring the light, brother.
these other systems.
Forget about them.
that-
Bring the light.
That are
Because it's
trying to
almost
doing
over.
their best to
Bring the light.
knock us out the box. Those people who want to bring the light, the ones who have historically converted that
Right.
cat who was hustling.
Right.
Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back in your lexicon of thought. I want you to go back in your memory banks. I want you to go to Boston. I want you to go to New York City. I want you to go to the Bronx. I want you to go to D.C., Southeast, and tell me how many people you think you impacted, that you brought with your light out of the darkness they were in of hustling. And then, including your dad. And then I want you to go into your lexicon of thought process, your same groups, and find out how many people you brought out of I love America, America stands for justice, etc. How many people you brought out of that one, and see if they match up. Because the ones that you get that brings you out of, I'm out of hustling, I'm going to go to accept this deen, I'm going to go do right, I'm going to go do right by my family, I'll bet you there are more than that of them than the ones that actually are like, well, bruh, look, I got, I'm making $100,000 a year. I'm not going down to no hood. I'm not, Baltimore, they got rats, so they got rats. I mean, that ain't got nothing to do
one
with
of the
me.
things is because the system is a system that recruits our leaders at early ages, and they send them into the system, of destruction. And so, that's why you'll end up finding a lot of them ended up in that drug life and all that, because they make it attractive
That's
to
right.
them.
That's
They
right.
call them to it. Even kids, that grow up in nice neighborhoods and smart, from our tribe, and they'll end up in that lifestyle because they make it attractive, like that show that you said with, $50 on 50 cent, whatever his name is, So
You call a brother $50. I love it.
whatever.
But
I
it's
mean,
the truth. It is the
yeah,
truth. They
yeah.
have
They love that. Oh, you
Absolutely.
can tell jokes
That
and all of that.
salaciousness,
And they look at him like,
somebody
this
murdered
is a
somebody
leader.
this week,
Yeah,
who
and
will get
this is what
killed.
you put in. And
That's
going back to a Paul Robeson.
That's right. That's right.
You know what I'm
Now
saying?
you talk about
the real
image.
soul.
That
Here it
is
is.
the
This
real-
man, like I said, 6 foot something,
That's
played football. When he played football, he was all American, and these people stepping on his hands at the beginning. When he was making for the team, I always remember that story at the
Absolutely.
beginning. He's stepping on his hands and with those cleats, and he said, he's trying to make the team, and he said the next time one of these guys do it, I'm just going to crush him. So the guy did it. He picked him up, had him over his head, and he went to throw him down, and the guy said, "You made the team." So this is a soldier. But now here it is. They won't show you somebody like that, but they're going to show you somebody like 50, lift some weights and stuff, walk around. I'm all of that. I did this. I got shot 18 times
That's
or
right.
whatever the amount of
That's
times,
right.
and I survived and stuff. Like,
And then
and
when
show
they-
you that as a hero.
There you go.
Going back to
That's
it. But
right.
my father's days, he was the enemy.
Right.
And he still is the enemy.
He still is the enemy.
And anybody that pushes that is the enemy.
Right, but the
and the people have to
philosophy-
recognize that they're the enemy.
That's right. Agreed. But they still have to recognize that the philosophy that helps create that is also the enemy.
Of
And we have to
course.
push back
All
against
of
the
it.
philosophies. Because the
This
philosophy
is the best philosophy.
The philosophy.
Not even philosophy. This is the best
The-
reality. Al-Haq.
The-
Al-Haq.
The-
What will make you know
the
what the Haq
philosophy-
is?
The philosophies hit more people harder than the individual incidents. And I even say that as it relates to us killing each other. The philosophy of self-hate that has been taught to us. You got white folks hating us, and they go through the exact same school and exact same thought process, and they learn to hate. hate black people. And so therefore, if you put your son or your daughter in that same social network of I hate black, what do you expect them to come out as except hating black? And so therefore, when a kid pulls a gun on another black kid, he's looking at himself, he's looking at his own self-hate. This is who he's killing. He's gunning down his own self-hate, just like that cop who stops you on the street corner who says you have no value. Well, everybody's been taught that the black man has no value. It's going to take philosophies, I would say Islam is that philosophy, that says you have value because Allah is the one who gives you value. Allah is the decider. So then once you get to that point, and that's when you begin to impact. See, because you talk about turning a generation around before they actually get to the point to where they reinstitute. See, people don't really understand this First Step Act. I tried to explain it to them,
I was loving it on the other show.
Right, it's coming between First Step, vaccinations,
actually the first step is really the last step.
Right there.
Yeah, the first step is really the last step to have full-fledged slavery back in place.
Oh, believe me, right.
To have it that I'm going to get points,
Who's back?
Because I'm going to work for $2 an hour. You know what I'm saying? That's why they're giving these kids these sentences. That's why they've been pushing. So here's the final thing for the final plan. Yeah, we fill it up. Now, now we can put them back to what?
There you go.
Forced labor.
Forced labor.
I don't even like using the word slavery. What I call it is it was forced labor. Basically,
full non-citizenship.
Yeah.
Where a black man has no right that a white man.
So here it is. We're going back into it again. Free forced labor.
That's right.
And we're back in free forced labor. Oh, okay. You're paying them $2. You're going to give them some time off. You just gave them some fantasy time.
This is the new one. This is just my rough draft of it, but it should be out on the street. It's called America in Blackface. And we discuss topics just like this in here. And that is, where is leadership at this time? What is leadership in our community? What does it look like? And how do we move forward in a direction that will allow us as a community to benefit from the leadership? Therefore, those of you who are out there who consider yourself a leader, step forward. Step forward with something that is beneficial to the community and stop running from the solution. If you have the solution, step forward and put it forward. If you have an issue with the leadership, step forward and put it. But if you sign up on the issue of leadership on the same side as those people who have historically put you down and your community down, and you can't run away from the history just simply because you want to win, or you're embarrassed by the fact that another part of the community looks worse than you, you are no better than the enemy. Allah says, Rasulullah taught us that if you participate in a good, you get the benefit of that good. If you participate in an evil, you get the benefit of that evil. And none of us want the benefit of the evil that this system has brought on our community. This has been Freedom Fighters of the DMV. My name is Muhammad Bashir. I'm here with like I said, my right-hand man on my left-hand side, Tariq Lang, who always brings fire. And that's why I always try to incite him in these kind of things, because I know he's going to bring it. Inshallah, we'll be back next week, and we're going to talk about, inshallah, voting and the concept of voting with some of the other heavy hitters from the community. Inshallah, until that time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll see you then, inshallah.